Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was a terrific report card on the way things are going. I have to say, though, he gives me a lot of credit, but I want to do a shout out to Jim Hayes. Please stand up, because Jim is the person he's the founder of Detroit Homecoming. It was his idea. He took it to Keith Crane. He introduced the two of us, and the rest is history. So thank you, Jim Hayes. Before we get into our next session, just a couple of housekeeping announcements. First, all of you have on your name tags where you will be for dinner tonight. It should be printed on your tag, and you also have your tour on your tag. If you need directions, we have 3 restaurants tonight that are open for our guests: Besa, Coriander, and the Stearns House. The topics you already know because you signed up for them. So make sure that if you don't know where you're going or you're not taking a shuttle, there's maps to all the restaurants at the registration desk. Also for the night owls, from 9 o'clock on, Eastern Market After Dark is a tremendous event, and we have kind of a hospitality suite there in Shed 2. So if you're going to stay up late after dinner and you want to come over to Eastern Market, please join us. For those of you who have a confirmed reservation, I know lots of people, 60-some people are going on the auto show tour today, but if you are going to the prom on the party on Friday night and you have a confirmed reservation, stop at the front desk today and they'll take care of you. I think that's all the housekeeping. And last but not least, shop. We've got retailers out there, including Christina Leidke, who's going to be a speaker tomorrow morning. I always do a lot of holiday shopping at Detroit Homecoming. So with that, let's go on to our next session. The mayor teed up today perfectly because he talked about the Ford investment, but we've got another investment too, and that is an expat by the name of Stephen Ross, who's been a speaker a couple of times at Homecoming, is a big U of M donor and booster, and he has initiated the opportunity to look at an innovation center, a partnership between University of Michigan, Olympia Development, and related companies, which is Stephen Ross's real estate arm. They are modeling their innovation center on a couple of things around the country, including Cornell Tech in New York City. And so today what we're going to do is we have the principals from 2 of our innovation centers, one Cornell Tech, one Virginia Tech, and Josh Serafman, who's the CEO of the Michigan Central Innovation Center, which the mayor has referenced, that is led by Ford Motor Company, here for a conversation with Alec Gallimore, the Robert J. Vlasic Dean of Engineering at the University of Michigan. So you're going to get a taste of things to come in this next session. Please join us on stage, Dean Gallimore and our speakers.
Good morning, everyone. We just have one more speaker coming out shortly, so we'll just wait for a minute. Maybe while we'll do that, we'll get started. Welcome all, and thanks for coming to this session. My name is Alec Gallimore. As you just heard, I'm the Robert J. Vlasic Dean of Engineering at the University of Michigan. I've been a faculty member at Michigan Engineering since 1992, and my area of expertise is advanced spacecraft plasma propulsion system. So in other words, everything I do and everything I look through the lens as rocket science, literally, so including this. Detroit connections that we have at the University of Michigan are myriad. We have, of course, students, alums, and friends here in Detroit as well. We have our Michigan Engineering Zone as well, where we work with 20 Detroit high school teams in FIRST Robotics, and the Think A Bit Lab, which we reach out to about 3,000 middle school students every year, annually as well. And what I wanted to do on the next slide, perhaps. Next slide, please. I don't think I have a clicker. Yes. Why don't we go to the next slide after this? Great. I wanted to start, before I ask the panelists to introduce themselves, I wanted to provide a little context in terms of our engagement at the University of Michigan here in Detroit. And it's through a network of things. But let me start with something that Mary just mentioned, the Detroit Center of Innovation. And she asked me to just give you a very brief update in terms of where we are right now. So as we speak right now, the Detroit Center of Innovation, as envisioned, would be a 3-building complex, as you see right here. A brand new $300 million, 200 square foot facility, and we were very pleased to receive $100 million from the state in appropriations recently to help support this as well. And you can see it's, of course, a partnership with a number of entities. But that's not the only building. What we'll be doing is also renovating and creating an incubator space for the Loyal Order of Moose Lodge building on Cass Avenue, and also building additional housing as well for 300 units. So that's the current plan for the Detroit Center of Innovation. Next slide, please. But I also wanted to put the context in terms of the network that we have in Detroit that the University of Michigan is engaged in. I did talk about one, of course, the Michigan Engineering Zone, but I also wanted to mention, for example, our Marygrove school system, which is a teaching school, and it supports services in terms of counseling. And in fact, our robotics program is very active in terms of having K-12 students learn about robotics. As you know, the University of Michigan also is discussing the possibility of renovating the Rackham building as a front door, if you will, to the citizens of Detroit as well. And something that you may not be familiar with is we were instrumental in the creation of the Advanced Manufacturing Partnership under President Obama. And one of the institutes that was created for this LIFT, which is Lightweight Innovations for the Future, is an advanced non-government, nonprofit manufacturing facility in Detroit, which is shown here on this map, if you can see here, LIFT. And then finally, we'll hear more about Michigan Central, and we're working with Ford and others to develop a partnership between Michigan Engineering and the University of Michigan in general, and of course, Michigan Central as well. So with that, I'd like to have each of the panelists please briefly introduce themselves, starting with Lance.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Lance Collins. I'm the Vice President and Executive Director of the Virginia Tech Innovation Campus. So I wanted to say a few words about that. Let me begin with the origin story. About 2017, Amazon announced that it would have a new headquarters, and the municipalities could bid for that new headquarters to come to their municipality. Over 200 bids came in. What was interesting about the Virginia bid is that it had looked at what had happened in New York, where there was a new tech campus built in New York City as a model for attracting Amazon. And so what they said to Amazon is, rather than just giving you financial incentives, we're going to actually address what ultimately is the biggest pain point for tech companies, which is talent. So the baseline of talent in the region was strong, but there was still a gap. And so, by investing in a university, you're actually addressing that particular gap. And so they committed in collaboration with the universities, with two primary ones, Virginia Tech and George Mason University, to grow the number of computer science and computer engineering graduates each year at the undergraduate level, which at Virginia Tech is in Blacksburg, and then at the graduate level in a new campus that's being built in Alexandria. So that was the winning bid, and so Amazon is located in Arlington, and then Alexandria is kind of on the southern end of what we're now rebranding as National Landing, with aspirations of having a really important district in the country that's focused on technology. So if I think about now I'm designing this new campus, what are the attributes of this new campus? And so what I would say is it's a little different than traditional academia in a few ways. So one of those ways is that we want people on the campus to be bold. And so what do I mean by that? I mean willing to take risks in order to have bigger rewards. And as an example of that, if one thinks about new company formation, when a company starts out, it's a pretty high-risk endeavor. And many of them will fail. But the ones that succeed, we all know about. And so we want to have a lot of entrepreneurship going on this campus, and so we have to be willing to take chances. The second attribute is what I call outward facing. By that I mean we want to be highly engaged as a campus with the broader tech community. So from the standpoint of designing the campus, that means that we want to hire faculty who are energized by that kind of activity. On a traditional campus, I would say, and Alec would probably confirm this, that maybe 10 or 15% of faculty have that orientation. And what we're trying to do is concentrate that so that 100% of the faculty have that particular orientation, because that's going to be part of the job of the campus. It's part of the mission, is that it's an economic campus. It's not just an academic campus. And then the next thing I would say is that we want it to be innovative. So we're not going to just do things the way we've always done them, but we want to do things in a different way. And so how does that manifest itself? So the biggest by volume degree on the campus is Master of Engineering degrees in computer science and computer engineering. But rather than teach in traditional class settings, the centerpiece of the education is going to be projects. And the projects are going to be sponsored by companies and brought onto the campus, and the students will be organized in teams. Why are we doing that? Because we want to teach them the technical skills that they need to be successful when they go out. But we also want to develop their professional skills. We want to produce leaders, people that can create new companies or create new lines within large companies. And in order to develop those muscles, it's called experiential learning. You've got to put them in circumstances where they can exercise those kinds of skills. So the final thing I want to say is that if we look historically around tech companies, they have not been very successful in terms of diversity. And so I've set the goal to make the Innovation Campus the most diverse tech campus in the country. That's a high bar. We're not there, but we're working at it. And by diversity, I mean in terms of both women and underrepresented minorities. And it's important as a leader that I set that bar high, because that then triggers a lot of activity to get us to be more successful in terms of advertising and exciting people, enrolling them, and ultimately graduating them. It's a work in progress, but I think it's extremely important. And the tech community won't change if academia doesn't change. So I think it's important that we're setting the pace. So with that, I'll stop. Be happy to answer questions when we get to it.
Great. Thank you very much, Lance. Fernando, please.
Thank you so much. And Lance, what you're saying just resonates so well with our goal too and our vision for our campus. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Fernando Gomez Vaquero. I'm the director of Runway and Spinouts at Cornell Tech. So I flew all the way from New York City here. I'll tell you a little bit of the story about Cornell Tech. Cornell Tech was an idea that was formed 10 years ago. During the Bloomberg administration, Michael Bloomberg said, look, we have places in the city that need economic redevelopment. And there's this big opportunity of having a university, world-class university, be part of economic redevelopment in the city. So why not bring a university, but with a very specific purpose of focusing on entrepreneurship, building companies, helping young, bright minds build the companies of the future. So Cornell Tech was born out of that idea, and Cornell had a very large vision that won a competition 10 years ago. And our vision was a $3 billion investment, resonates with what we're talking about today, $3 billion investment with a great partnership with the Technion, Israel Institute of Technology, who have been wonderful partners in helping us build that tech ecosystem. 5 years ago, so where is Cornell Tech? Hopefully you'll go and take a look. It's in Roosevelt Island. Roosevelt Island was a very fascinating place. It had an old dilapidated hospital. It had an old dilapidated prison, and it had an old dilapidated another smallpox hospital, right? So not really a place where you wanted to go, right? Unless you had smallpox or were a prisoner. So not a good place actually to live either. But this is actually the genesis of very interesting ideas. How do we redevelop that we believe cannot be redeveloped? And we took that place and we said, okay, we have a good canvas and we can start from scratch. And what we did is the campus that you see right before you, right? We invested now $1 billion on this campus. 5 years ago, we opened the campus with 3 buildings, and now we opened 2 more. Fun fact, I was the first one ever to live in that building that you see right there. So I'm very proud of that, to be the first resident of that campus. And right now, we are a campus that holds about 500 students, and we build about 90 companies from scratch every year. Our goal is to build 500 companies from scratch every year. And that is doable as a campus, right? And why do we want to do that? Because it's not just about us educating students, teaching them how to be entrepreneurs and how to do great entrepreneurship. It's about us creating an economic engine for the city of New York. And that's what I believe it's the right model, and actually the model that we want to see replicated here as well. We're still on the road. You know, we are 1/4 of the way there. We still have a couple billion left to invest, 5 buildings to build. So, you know, we're on our way of doing that. Many more students to bring in as well. But it has been a wonderful journey, and I would love to talk to you a little bit more about, you know, what were the success factors and what have been a lot of the mistakes that we've done, because that's definitely, you know, a big part of it. You know, making mistakes, learning how to do it. But by now, you know, I believe that we're on our way to step on the accelerator and help a lot of these young people.
Great, thank you very much. Josh, please.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Josh Sauersman, the CEO of Michigan Central. Before I get to Michigan Central, I'm going to digress on 2 subjects. The first is I'm like a homecoming light story. I started my career here in Detroit. I'm a New Yorker. Got my master's in urban planning at the University of Michigan, and while there, ended up getting very active in Detroit, moved to Detroit, worked for a community development corporation on the east side, the Island View Village Development Corporation, and then something called Detroit Economic Growth Corporation. For family reasons, I had to go back to New York. 25 years later, I finally have the opportunity to engage again in Detroit, something I've been wanting to do that whole time. So it's an honor for me to be able to be part of the homecoming story in my own tiny little way. Secondly, I just want to add to what Fernando was saying, because this group is a little heavy on the Cornell Tech. Lance, who's way too modest, was one of the academic leaders of the team at Cornell when he was Dean of Engineering there, that birthed the vision. And I had the opportunity to lead the strategy for the competition and lead the negotiation with the city, and then actually do the partnership deals for the building you live in and the rest of the campus. So there are many interesting examples and models about Cornell Tech that all of us can get into. Let me shift to Michigan Central. I think on that, I'm just going to go with what the mayor said, and call it a day. That was amazing. I can't compete with how Mayor Duggan articulated what we are doing. Based on that incredible vision from Bill Ford and an extraordinary investment from the Ford Motor Company, Michigan Central, we're well on our way to, I think, really a defining transformation. The station itself, and we have other buildings and properties around that, will become the kind of mixed-use destination worthy of the responsibility we feel with that building. Literally everybody I meet has a personal story about it. We need to make it an incredible place for Detroiters, for visitors. But at the heart of that, the engine that's driving the transformation that we think ultimately has extreme importance and scale for Detroit and the region is, as a world-leading community, focused on building solutions and skills at what we describe as the intersection of mobility and society. There's many, many places you can test a technology. There's lots of places where you can simulate something. There are very few places where everything is focused entirely on how do new solutions meet the real world in a meaningful way and accomplish meaningful objectives. We think this will manifest itself in 3 ways. One, a truly market-leading cluster of economic activity, brain power. That's companies, academia, that's philanthropy, that's government, that's civic organizations, all focused around this intersection of mobility and society. Secondly, the ability to accelerate the adoption of new solutions into the real world. And third, we think this work gives us insight into the kind of skills I would sort of describe as innovation competencies that we can extract lessons from for curriculum that can scale with many institutions at the accreditation and the degree level for the skills of the future. We're already on our way. One of our first building to come online later this fall, right next to the station. It's the one to the left. Beautiful Albert Kahn warehouse, long, interesting history here in Detroit. By the time we open, we will have a number of companies who have already committed to being there and who are already doing work with. In fact, a couple of companies that we're engaged in pilots with are going to be here, I think, outside. Electron, the mayor mentioned the inductive charging in the street. Electron, an amazing company we're partnering with, they will be here. A company focused on truly market-leading aerial mobility. Another area that we think will become a real center point on will be here. So anyways, we are on our way to becoming this nexus all around how new solutions in the real world really interact.
Great, wonderful, thank you. Before I go ahead and go back to the panel, I want to provide a little context for the discussion that we're going to have for the next 30 minutes or so. You know, when Homecoming began in 2014, Detroit was in the midst of the largest municipal bankruptcy in the United States history. It would have been very difficult to imagine that just in 2022, two major initiatives were poised to usher Detroit into a new age of innovation. One we just heard about, which of course is Michigan Central, and one that I talked about very briefly, the Detroit Center for Innovation. So how can Detroit leverage these big bets? What can we learn from other cities like Arlington and New York City, for example, and other innovation centers that have been popping up around the country? What is the role of academia, not only the University of Michigan, but Wayne State in particular as well? And so we have an opportunity here to learn from these very experienced folks here and to really understand what is it that we should be doing and thinking about as we navigate future of innovation campuses here in the city of Detroit. So with that, let me just start by asking some questions. And I'll just go ask you one at a time, maybe starting with you, Lance. You've already described your initiative and your vision for what you're trying to do in Arlington. So how would you define success, and maybe over a time horizon of 5 or 10 years or so?
So I think what's important and it was said by all of us, is recognizing that we're not here in sort of the purest of pure academic missions, you know, enlightenment, that kind of thing. But we're really here as part of an economic incentive, a mission of trying to grow the community of the tech ecosystem. So to me, you have to adjust your measurements, and it's in fact one of the questions that I get the most from my advisory board, et cetera, is how should we be thinking about success? So rather than just thinking about, how many publications you had or what's your H factor and, the usual things that you would find on a traditional academic campus, I think we have to think about, have we actually impacted the tech ecosystem and measure that and in ways that were described, for example, are there startup companies, are there successful startup companies? Are the existing tech companies being able to identify the right levels of talent and grow at the rates that they can? They are often limited. The thing I hear, it's ubiquitous across all of these tech companies, is they are limited not by financial limitations or idea limitations, they're limited by talent. And so are we supplying the talent at the rates that they need in order for them to continue to grow? And because I'm in the DC region, because another question I get is, so what's different about, I was part of the Cornell and the Cornell Tech bid, but what's different in the DC region is that I'm also right next to the federal government. Federal government has the Department of Defense. There's a lot of the defense contractors are there. Boeing just announced they're moving their headquarters Raytheon just announced they're moving their headquarters into this region. They're really coming into this what I'm calling national landing to be close to the government, because there's another front there, which is the international competition in technology. And that's another, that's a global competition that we need to, stay ahead of competitors that are like, Russia and China and others. And so, again, to me, success means that we are igniting and spurring on technologies that continue to keep the United States at the forefront. So it's those kind of things, it's that sort of national and global impact to me that's the most important.
Fernando?
Yeah, so I tend to think about that as, well, I have way too many bosses, right? So there's lots of people that want to see economic outcomes out of this. So we have development, the Development Corporation of the City of New York that want to see job creation and good jobs, right? So high wages. And how do you do that? Number of startups and those startups creating jobs, right? I have the community. So the community wants to see engagement and wants to see that a lot of our startups are actually working to redefine and grow interesting technologies that help those communities, particularly in the healthcare side. I have the university that does care about patents and cares about publications, right? So I cannot forget about that. So we have many things that we measure, and the way that I like to think about that is, I like having all of these bosses, right? It's complicated, of course, because everybody wants something different. But at the end of the day, you should strive to create a system that it's focusing on creating great jobs. It's focusing on doing high, good education, focusing on deep tech, creating intellectual property, and creating great science out of that. You also need to focus on community engagement. How many of those companies are going to places like Queens and the Bronx and Brooklyn? You need to focus a lot on, how are you servicing your students? So it's a combination of many different things, right? I think what I would point out, which it's really important, is when we measure what we're doing and we report what we're doing, we are very aware that we're not trying to replicate things that the city already has. We're trying to fill white spaces. We're trying to help the city in places where it's difficult to build stuff, right? This is very, I think, very especially true in the investment side. New York City has a good investment community, particularly venture capital and larger private equity, and we're not trying to replicate that. We're trying to fill that white space where we create new companies, new opportunities, train people. I often say we take people when no one should invest in them, right? So it's too crazy, too early, but that's the whole point. So we want to fill those voids where the city does not have another system to do that. That way we support when the city does have that other system to do that. And that's really the key, is that awareness of many different bosses and trying to obviously cater to them, but at the same time being true to the fact that we're here to fill a gap, right? Not to replicate what the city has already done, but to really fill that space where something is needed. And that's that combination. That's how we think about it.
I'm struck by the fact that, of course, DCI, Virginia Tech, and Cornell Tech are born out of higher education, universities. But of course, Michigan Central comes out of the corporate world. So it'd be interesting to touch upon that context as you answer that question.
Sure. I think it's the nature of the beast that these kinds of endeavors are really complicated. And so tons of stakeholders, tons of objectives, most of them in sync with each other, sometimes objectives that are at odds with each other. Success is a complicated question. I think all of the metrics jobs created, there's all kinds of the sort of typical metrics. I think for us, and I'm not sure we've hit on the answers yet, but I think at the end of the day, whether it's 10 years, whatever the time frame, and this will continue over time, I think we have to look at things like, does Detroit and Southeast Michigan become a net importer of talent instead of a net exporter? I think there's sort of, and again, I don't mean to say Michigan Central alone can accomplish this, but I think we can be a significant contributor to it. And we have to start looking at it from that perspective of, are we truly moving the needle on the things that matter? You touched on what I think is the most interesting thing about Michigan Central, and what makes it, I'm biased, I admit, the most interesting project happening in the country, if not the world, is that it's a very, very rare opportunity where the catalyst is coming from the private sector. And it changes everything. It makes some things very different. It makes some things harder, some things easier. But that's rare, and that's an asset to really, really exploit. And I think we have a responsibility to do that. And one of the ways that we want to meet that responsibility is it's not about a single company. This is, in fact, an open platform. You may have heard us talk about a partnership already with Google. We've partnership with the city and state been amazing, with a whole bunch of companies already, and there will be many more. But the whole point is that that sort of corporate credibility allows us to become that open platform for many actors. And I think in some ways, and my fellow panelists may dispute this, but I think in some ways, it also allows us to be a multi-party activity for multiple academic institutions. Like even the partnership between Cornell and Technion, that was not easy to pull off. It's not easy to manage that. It's hard to get institutions to work together. I think it's an example of how our platform can actually make that a lot easier. We can be this sort of neutral ground upon which we pull in many, many actors and set this tone of collaboration that I think is critical.
Great. I mean, a strong feature in all of these campuses, of course, is the word partnership. Identifying opportunities for projects, for activity-based learning for our students, and actually helping to create new technologies and new companies for economic development. So maybe a question to ask each of you is, how do you think about establishing these partnerships? And what does partnerships mean to you in terms of large companies, small companies, et cetera? So Lance?
So this is an incredibly important question. It's one of the differentiating factors, I think, in terms of what I am calling the innovation or tech campus in comparison to a traditional academic campus, is this high degree of connectivity. And part of that really is about culture, building a culture on the campus that embraces the sort of messiness of that connectivity. So we need to create a portal, a way in which companies can be part of the campus. And the centerpiece for us is this notion of projects, right? So all companies are invited to propose and sponsor projects on the campus. And the requirement for them to sponsor a project is that they have someone in their company willing to help the team work on the project, because it's important, in my opinion, to have that connectivity. And so what I discovered is that there's incredible hunger in the community of industry in this region to be invited. It's like they've always wanted to be, they like looking through the window and kind of wishing they could be part of this. And then it's like, no, you're actually invited in. And so the response has been amazing. There are companies that have put real money behind this to help for us to build up the programming. But what I really think is that intellectual piece of that connectivity is extremely important. So there's this energy that generates. And of course, from a student standpoint, this is a really rich environment in which to learn, because again, you're learning the skills that translate to successful careers when they get out there. So the two-way street on that has been extraordinary, and I think there's just room for that to expand.
Yeah, so before I go into the partnerships, I just wanted to say that when I started with Cornell Tech, my background is I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a material scientist that build companies, and I was always very skeptical of universities being able to build this type of environment for companies to thrive. But one of the things that I've been amazingly surprised at Cornell Tech is that it really feels more corporate than actually it feels like a university. It feels like that's the ecosystem, right? So that interactivity, that connection, that partnership. So I think you're right. What you need is that sort of like environment, an ecosystem to grow. The way that we think about partnerships, and I was just thinking when the mayor was here, is by telling all of these corporations that are around us, and not just corporations, nonprofits, governments, even cities around the whole United States, what we ask them is for their problems. And I think that's key, right? One of the things that New York has in abundance is problems, right? So what we ask them is, give us your problems, challenge us. Challenge us to what is it that you want to see build? And what are the things that you cannot work on right now because you don't have that capacity, but you see this problem and you want to do it. We call it how might we's, right? So how might we use blockchain to really rethink the way that we do financial information? How do we help migrants actually get their health information? How might we? All the time we're thinking about these how might we's, which are just problems. Give us your problems. And what we do is we take all of the population that we have and we put them to work on those problems. So that's the way that we think about partnerships, is about giving that value to that community. And it could be large corporates, which they do. They give us a ton of problems in a good way, right? So we have cities that give us problems. We have hospitals that give us problems. We have nonprofits that give us problems. And what that makes it is that they work with us for a full year, and with our students for a full year, ideating, creating, mentoring, engaging, trying to understand how to solve this. And that, I felt, has been the real key driver of our partnerships, which has been, let's focus on the value that we can create for all of these people, and focus on the thing that they have in abundance that we can actually help them with, which are problems. And I think that's a big opportunity that we have here too. We have a city that can actually ask for those challenges. And you'll always get someone telling you about their problems. That's very easy to do. They always give you their problems. So that just creates a wonderful, very engaging partnership.
Before I move on to you, maybe I'd like to double click on that. You have a treasure trove of problems, a spreadsheet of problems. What do you do next to do the triage and to convert that into projects?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is we create, we have a population that is a little diverse in their background. So we have computer scientists, electrical engineers, we have some MBAs, lawyers, we bring in some designers from Parsons, and now we have our architecture school that just moved in as well. So we have different disciplines, and we create these teams that are multidisciplinary. So we create the teams, we give them the list of problems, and we have them rank them. And hey, what are the problems that you want to work on? So we do kind of this ranking. Yes, we have an algorithm, because of course we're a computer science school, so we need to have one. We have an algorithm to do that. And then we put them to ideate. Last year, these students created more than 10,000 different ideas on how to solve those problems, which are about 90 problems. So imagine that, 10,000 different ideas. And it's about getting those teams that are multidisciplinary to be engaged with these problems and then starting to work on those. Now, we give them later on the flexibility of changing teams, changing ideas, but it's in the process of doing that ideation and taking them through the whole process of how do you take that idea and turn it into a product, turn it into an MVP, do customer discovery, work with these partners. So it's a year-long process. This is not 2 weeks, this is not 3 weeks. This is a year-long process that we do with them, where we tell them that they need to focus on solving these problems. So that's really the methodology. It's a program that we call Studio, and I really think it's a big differentiation piece of Cornell Tech, the way that we do that.
Very good, great. Josh, please, on partnerships.
Since we're not a university, there's no way we'll ever build the capacity to do everything we need to do. So fundamentally, our DNA is about partnerships. We have to leverage literally everybody else to get to what we need to do. But interestingly, we have a lot of mechanisms that are actually kind of similar. And for example, in partnership with an amazing company also out of New York called New Lab, we also call them studios, where we're matching issue, opportunity, in some cases problem or challenge, with emerging companies, emerging technologies, established companies, and all working together to sort of figure out how do we find sort of specific solutions, and in that process cultivate emerging companies, cultivate the relationship with community through that, all those pieces. So a similar sort of focused model, but I think at a macro level for us, the whole thing is a model based on partnership.
Go ahead, Lance, please.
I just wanted to pick up
Yeah,
on
great.
something that struck me in both of your responses. You know, it's in some ways the starting point, the kernel of the work is the problem itself, and then you wrap sort of expertise and brain power around going after that. And what's interesting about traditional academia, and I'm going to sound like I'm being really critical of it because I spent my whole career there and I love it and we're the best in the world at it. It's, you know, it's not really a criticism. It's just the nature of the beast is that, you know, people just sort of have breakthroughs. So, you know, the faculty used to come to me when I was dean at Cornell and they'd say, hey, I have a great breakthrough. And, you know, there should be a company. But the question is whether that anybody really cares about that breakthrough. Is there a market out there? None of that thinking happened. It was just a brilliant step that they had taken, and they said, look, I did a brilliant thing. That's what's important. Yeah. What's really interesting and only hit me in this conversation is really if you flip that around and you say, let's start with the problem, and then now, you know, you sort of bring people onto that. That's that 10 to 15% that I was saying that I need on the innovation campus. In the broad world, you need all of it, but in terms of moving a city forward or moving the kind of activities we're describing, this is just so much more efficient in terms of getting those contributions to make a difference. So anyway.
No, that's right. At NASA, we used to call it a combination of technology push and mission pull, basically. Exactly. That type of thing. I want to start with you, Josh, in terms of, we're here in Detroit, so maybe we should talk a little bit about Detroit. What do you see as a key competitive advantage that Detroit offers for this type of endeavor?
That's a great question. And I pause only because I think a lot about this, and I think there's a sort of quintessential Detroitness that I have not quite figured out how to articulate yet. And as soon as I do, game over. What do I think? I think, you know, there's all the sort of traditional assets. We have an incredible talent base in different kinds of engineering, design, you name it. We've got you know, everything that grows out of the legacy. I mean, you heard last night that awesome panel, whether it's music, whether it's the automotive industry. There's a ton of things coming out of that. I think what I always find very striking is something I'm going to call accessibility. And I find that very unique here, especially having spent so much time in markets like New York. If you want to do something here, there's a path. And what I mean by that is you can find the other people. You can find you know, it may be that you have to go elsewhere because we don't have enough capital at this point or whatever, but like, it's just, we have this incredible asset that you can just do stuff here. And that to me, and I know it's a little bit abstract, but, and I'm still trying to figure out how do I really nail that, but to me it's very striking. And you know, Michigan Central wouldn't happen in New York. Just wouldn't. It just could not. And I use that as an example of like, stuff can happen here that wouldn't elsewhere.
That's great. Your impression, Fernando, about the Detroit advantage, potentially?
So, you know, I think that as you start growing your, you know, that ability of recognizing problems and solving problems, that will reveal itself. And I can tell you a little bit the experience that we've had in New York is, I always say, oh, we're generalists, we like to do everything, but health turns out to be, you know, one of the most important sectors. And we end up building almost 40% of our companies are related to life sciences and health technologies. So I think when you start challenging people and saying, hey, give me your problems, give me your challenges, and people start talking about the things that are complicated, could be mobility, you know, could be health related, could be urban related. That's when you really start seeing, okay, this is our niche, this is our power, this is the thing where we can create the most. So I think it's an exercise that you have to do to find that answer. It's not something that you could really say prior to. Right? And then once you find that answer, what you need to tell yourself is, well, do I stop it or do I press the accelerator and actually go with it? And the latter is the right one, right? So you just go with it and try to build as much capacity as possible on that. So I don't have an answer yet, but I think that you can get that answer pretty soon, and you'll find it just by focusing on working on problems.
Yeah, I appreciate it. You're offering a process of how we might get there. And Lance, you have a connection to Detroit. You and I have known each other for a while, and so you have an interesting purview for answering this question, perhaps.
Well, yeah, what I have to say, so I've had probably a dozen or so conversations in this visit, and then I had a visit earlier in April, is there's incredible pride here. Every single person, the first thing I'm asked is, so you're from Detroit? And I feel like I have to apologize. I'm so sorry. I'm not born, raised in Detroit, and I apologize for not being from the greatest city on the earth. It's simply a fact. It's just the truth. I'm sorry, but you know, there's something to that, and that is important. I had a friend when I was in college from Detroit who would take me around, and this was like, you know, in the early '80s, you know, and Detroit was different. And but there was the same thing. It was the same kind of incredible sort of pride in the city, and a sense that the city's always going to, you know, move forward. It's going to rebound. And of course, in the last decade or so, it's been amazing to watch. So I think that's unique. I don't think every place has that feeling. I don't get that question anywhere else the way I get it here. Like it's really an interesting thing. And I think there, you know, that kind of momentum. And all I can say is, you know, Mike, we have one of our benefactors is Boeing. Boeing gets me tickets into the Kennedy Honors, where Berry Gordy was just, you know, recognized in a thing that was, I mean, yeah, there were 4 other people recognized, but you know, I mean, once you get to the Motown, you know, it sort of blows everything else out of the water. It was really an astounding show and a sense of, you know, where that pride comes from. I mean, there's just something special, and you know, it's tangible to me.
You need to bottle it.
If I might add,
yeah,
just
please.
one
Yeah.
thing that I thought too
Great.
is, you know, there's also nothing wrong with focusing on themes that are very topical for the time that we're at this point in time, right? We see right now a lot of work and a lot of talk about manufacturing, electric vehicles, which is a topic that I love because that's my background. Electric vehicles. Before that was security. Before that was big data. Before that was IoT. And we see like these waves of things, you know, waves of technologies. I remember when, you know, nanotech was the big thing, and then it was, now it's blockchain or NFTs, right? So I think it's important also to focus on that because it gives you a broader global context. And so you have things that are very much ingrained into that thing that you do pretty well, where you're great at. But at the same time, you're also focusing on challenges where they can be national problems or global problems. And you have to do both at the end of the day. So there's nothing wrong about doing that, and we do it all the time. You know, last year I had a lot of students that wanted to do NFTs, so let's just go and try to do that. But overall, you actually, you know, keep this momentum on the things that you do pretty well, and then you explore those very interesting ideas on topics that are just coming, you know, in waves. So those 2 things are important.
Great. You know, we may have time for about one more question or so. So let me go through this quickly. You know, I'll tell you that one of the areas that we're debating at the University of Michigan with respect to the DCI is how to think about the notion of master's education, and really the aspect of that really implies importing talent, if you will, from outside Detroit, versus investing in ways in which we can develop organic talent in Detroit, and vis-a-vis not necessarily Detroiters who have college degrees. So other types of badging, other types of ways of education that may not be degree-based, if you will. I wonder if you've thought about this notion of course, master's degrees, but other types of credentialing that can help educate local population, for example, who may have high school degrees and are looking to get to the next level of education. Anyone want to start?
So, I mean, I'm happy to start. I think that's an extremely important question, is that, you know, so in the university setting, we think about there being other certifications that we can provide for people who may not want to go all the way to completing a degree, but who want to gain some skills that they can then take back into the workforce. So we're generally in this context thinking about working professionals, people who are out there, they're doing something, they've kind of hit a roadblock, and they need to gain some skills. So I think it's important that we're open to that, and so we've been building programming, in collaboration with companies to, really understand where are the opportunities. And when we think about those things being stackable, so they may maybe spend a few months getting a certificate at this point, go back to work, come back, do another one, and then we're, essentially then we want to make it possible for them to assemble all of those things into ultimately a degree if they were to so choose. So, this idea that we're, not just about, terminal degree, but that we're really talking about, broader sets of training. And of course, we don't offer everything, and there are other community college schools that we work closely with, et cetera, to sort of fill in the gaps. The other thing I just want to take a moment on the master's degree, because often that's thought of as this high rung. But in this new world, we're really looking to see people may have backgrounds that have absolutely nothing to do with computer science or computer engineering, but maybe they've had some exposure in work that gets them the skills that would allow them to enter into the degree, even though they don't have an undergraduate degree in that major. So there's all of this sort of shifting that goes around, and course change, career change that can happen. And I think the master's degree is playing a pivotal role as far as that's concerned. And that was not historically the case. And so I think we really need to think differently about what it is. It's a changing, landscape. If you were, you don't want to go all the way back to, earning an entire bachelor's degree in computer science just because you happen to not major in that before. The master's is a nice way to kind of get yourself into the game if you're so interested. So anyway, I'll stop there.
Fernando, Josh?
Go ahead.
I was going to say I'm the only non-academic. It's a little intimidating to discuss this, but I think for us, we would not feel like we succeeded if our contribution to skills training, to workforce development, did not cut across multiple levels, from high school through advanced degrees, from accreditation to whatever kinds of degree programs. And we need to think about the workforce. If you think about sort of the future of mobility, the workforce and the opportunities created will need all of that.
Yeah, I think I'm a big believer that you need to build, you have the talent here, right? What it needs is an opportunity to thrive. That's really the case. So I do think that you have a great pool of people, great talent. And so how do you change a little bit of the systems of the university so that when they go there, they don't feel like they're spending a year learning, and then after that year they get the diploma and they're like saying, okay, what do I do? Right. I think that's the main problem, right? So they spend a year doing something, and now they are holding, a little tube of paper and saying, I don't know how to get started. Our idea has always been, let's give them the opportunity during that same year to explore the other stuff, to be entrepreneurs, to build companies, to go and figure out how to work with companies. And so literally when they finish their degree, they take that diploma, and then they go to another stage because they're pitching to VCs, their company. That's what we're doing over there. So we're giving them that whole year also to do these other things. And so for us, it's very important to give them that space. We built 3 degree programs in partnership with the Technion, which immediately tell them you need to focus on an application. Yes, it's information systems, computer science, but how are you applying it to media or to health or to urban technologies? And those are 3 programs that we have right now. So I think you can build that capacity, but give them the opportunity to do everything at the same time. They can do it. They're not like us. I don't think that I would have been able to do that when I was studying, but right now people can manage all of that information, are very passionate about building things, and they're willing to spend 80 hours a week, not on just studying, but building things. And we need to give them the opportunity to do that, and that's how we create, help this talent grow and succeed.
It's heartening to hear so much emphasis on access, diversity, and equity in this conversation. We only have a few tens of seconds, and maybe I'll ask each of you very quickly, what advice would you offer us as we think about this type of transformation we're hoping to see in Detroit? Lance?
What I would say is that you really think about all of the dimensions of it. So there's the industry, and you're right, it could be government agencies, it could be K through 12 systems and so forth, but sort of the externalities. You think about the students and thinking about what's the value proposition for the students, and then you have to, again, in an academic setting, think about the faculty.
Right. Yeah.
For me, is give exposure to problems. People have problems, they want to talk about them, and we have a lot of talent that want to solve them. If you make that connection, you have a winning proposition.
Bring us home.
I would say here in Detroit, I think anyone's success is everybody's success, and collaboration is key for us.
Thank you very much. Please join me in giving applause to our panelists. Oh, one question?
Yeah, so I'll start with that. I'll give another color of that. We have now a lot of parity between women and men doing computer science degrees, actually about 50-50, sometimes there are even more women. But you see a huge drop when it comes to entrepreneurship. So actually more, 70% of them are male-led, which is really, it's a fascinating and complex problem. So we do have a program that used to be called Women in Technology in New York. Now it's called Breakthrough, where we help women that are doing computer scientists get internships in larger companies. And I think that last year they placed over 200 women into companies so they can get that experience. In our entrepreneurship programs, we are keenly aware of that diversity, and that's actually one of the components that we use to select the companies that we invest in. So we are right now in our portfolio where about 30% of them are female-led, and we want to increase that proportion as well. And it's not just women, minorities as well, because we have underrepresentation of Black, of Latinos. So there's that diversity is a really complicated problem. Yes, we have programs doing that, but I can tell you there's a lot of systemic problems with that. And it's just really crazy to see that drop, right? That we have the talent, we have the population, then all of a sudden when you see the creation of companies, it just completely drops. I think a lot of that has to do with the risk that is seen in building companies. That if you're an entrepreneur, you're not sure about healthcare, you're not sure about being able to actually afford raising a family. So there's lots of topics there that we try to address, but it's a constant challenge, and we don't have it figured out yet.
Yeah, maybe I think we're getting asked to, but maybe you can catch up with the panelists afterwards. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you everyone for joining us.